Okay, sorry about the delay. In the last year, we started off with a question which we left unanswered. And the question was as follows. Two people come to the entire Reuven and Shimon. Reuven is a landlord, Shimon is a renter, a seicher and a masker. And Shimon, the seicher, has not paid rent in 6 months, 8 months, however, whatever you would like. And Reuven, the Seicher Tainas that Reuven the Masker, I'm sorry, Tainas that want to kick him out. And Shimon the renter uh, counters that you can't kick me out because the law is that there is wherever it is, there are tenant protection laws in place that protect me from being kicked out for inability to pay rent. So last time we mentioned that during COVID there were such laws, but really there are such laws in all over in different places under various circumstances. So basically, what it boils down to is such a law, a tenant protection law, protected under Dina Demalchusa? Is it recognized as Dina Demalchusa? Would a bezdin be able to paskin in favor of Shimon, the renter, in such a case? Before we answer that question, let's consider another question. Levi and Yehuda. Levi lends Yehuda $1 million. And instead of paying it back, Yehuda declares bankruptcy. And under whatever the bankruptcy arrangement is, Levi, the lender, gets either nothing or very little of his original loan back. Then, at a later time, the lender's, the borrower's fortune changes. He makes a little bit more money, and he gets back on his feet, which is the idea of bankruptcy. The idea of bankruptcy is to be able to give somebody the opportunity to turn over a new leaf and not be uh, hindered by their debt for the rest of their lives. And now he has money. So comes along Levi, his original creditor, his original malva, and he says, "Pay me back what you owe me from the original loan that I gave you that you never paid me back." He says, "What do you mean? I declared bankruptcy. You took whatever you were able to get under bankruptcy, a fraction of the original loan, let's say 10%, and you were Michael on the rest. And not only were you Michael on the rest, even if you were Michael on the rest, there's something called Dina Demalchusa. It's true that according to halacha, in Chesh and Mishpah, there's no such thing as bankruptcy. You owe somebody money, you have to pay them back, unless they're Michael. But if they're not Michael, you have to pay them back. There's no such thing as bankruptcy. But Dina Demalchusa, there is such a thing as bankruptcy, and the halacha is Dina Demalchusa Dina. So that's a taina between these two parties. So again, Shaila, who is correct? Is bankruptcy recognized under Dina Demalchusa, or is it not? So to briefly recap what we discussed in previous year, that the halacha is taka Dina Demalchusa Dina. We discussed that there are various approaches in Rishonim. What is the rationale of Dina Demalchusa Dina, which we're not going to get into again. That's again was discussed at length in previous shiur. Then there are various opinions what Dina Demalchusa applies to. The Rama in Shulchan Aruch and Siman Shin Samach Tes Sifches brings that there is an opinion in Rishonim that Dina Demalchusa only applies to things that have to do with karka, that have to do with the land, that have to do with property. However, the Rama says v'yesha that Dina Demalchusa applies to all laws. The Rama says v'chein ikr. That's the halacha. So again, la halacha, we say that Din Demalchusa applies to everything. And then we spoke about how there are two types of Din Demalchusa. There's din Demalchusa that's ben adam lachaveri, and there's ben adam lamakim, or in this case, ben adam lamalchus. And we spoke that din Demalchusa with things that are ben adam lamalchus, kulei alma, that is what din Demalchusa is. So the obligations to pay taxes and other laws that are between the individual and the government and the king are definitely fall under the rules of din Demalchusa. But then there's another category of din Demalchusa, which is bein adam lachaveri. Now comes the shaila: when do we say din Demalchusa bein adam lachaveri? Because lachera, if we think about it, we have a shulchan aruch for disputes that are bein adam lachaveri. So a dispute between two people, do we say din Demalchusa or not? And we discussed that this is a machlekes Ramah and Shach. The Ramah says that something that is a davar prati, there's a personal thing between two people, that's ben adam lachaveri, we don't say din Demalchusa, because if you say din Demalchusa in such a case, then the lashon of the Alter Rebbe, the lashon of the Ramah is similar. Bitalta dinei atera chas v'shalom. Then you could take the whole dinei atera, and we don't need them. But a davar klali, that's l'takanas kol b'nei medina kula, a general, uh, a general rule, a general law that is for the benefit of the entire country, of the entire population. In that case, we do say Dina Demalchusa, even neged din Torah. However, the Shach says no. He says we don't say Dina Demalchusa on something that's ben adam lachaveri, period. We have a shulchan aruch for things that are ben adam lachaveri, unless it's something that the shulchan aruch doesn't talk about. Over there, we follow din Demalchusa, but something that's din Demalchusa, we never say din Demalchusa neged din Torah. By something that is bein adam lachaveri, even if it's a takanas kol b'nei hamedina. So, having said this introduction, there's a chazar of what we discussed in previous year. Let's now examine these two shilas that we began with. So, the first shaila is rent control or tenant protection laws. So, like we mentioned earlier, this tenant protection was recently as recently as 2020, 2022, there were various laws instituted in New York and in other places about tenant protection, but the emesis in kol chadash tachas hashemesh, the idea of tenant protection goes back a long, long time, and the poskim discuss it already in the beginning of the 20th century, if not earlier. So we have, on the one hand, and we're going to see that we have a machlekes mina kotza ela kotza about whether we say din Demalchusa in such a case. But before we go and see what the poskim said, let's just seemingly what does the question boil down to? The question boils down to: is this something are the laws of tenant protection something that's l'takonas kol b'nei Medina or not? Because if they're l'takonas kol b'nei Medina, then the Ramah would say that we should honor them, and the Shach would say that we don't honor them, because again, let's remember that al pi halacha, there's no such thing as tenant protection. If I own a house and I'm entitled to kick you out of it when the term of our schirus ends. If I agree to rent your house for a certain amount of time, then I can kick you out at the end. According to tenant protection, you can't. So the Shach would say, even if it's l'takanas kol b'nei Medina, you can't. It doesn't work. The Ramah would say, if it's l'takanas kol b'nei Medina, it would work. So l'chayra, that's what it should boil down to. It should boil down to a machlekes Ramah and Shach, if we can say that's l'takanas kol b'nei Medina. However, as we'll see, first of all, it's not so pashut, and second of all, or really, first of all, it's not possible to say to determine whether something is takana is called b'nei medina, because something that's takana to me is not a takana to you. Something that a tenant protection is a takana for tenants, and it's a tremendous avla for landlords. So is it takana called b'nei medina or not? Okay, so enough introductions. Shalos Tshuvas Imri Yosher, Chelik Beisim Kufnan Beis, Remeir Arik. In the beginning of the 20th century, again, there were two world wars. The Imri Yosher passed away in 1925, I believe. So between the world wars, and there was a lot of displacement. There was a lot of poverty. There was a lot of chaos, and this was a big problem. So says the Imri Yosher. Regarding your shaila, which you asked, regarding somebody who rented out his apartment for a certain amount of time. And at the end of the rental period, the renter wishes to remove the renter from his apartment and take it for himself, or rent it to someone else for a higher price. So that's the shaila. What's the answer? Says the Imri Yesher, Dina Demalchusa Dina. If the law is that the tenant is protected, they can't be kicked out, the landlord cannot kick him out. He says, moreover, after Gamashach Moida, Bekarka, even though the Shach says that something that's, even if it's Lakanos Kol B'nei B'dina, we don't say Din de Malchusa when it's something that's been Nadam L'chaver if it's against Din Torah. He says over here, maybe even the Shach agrees because it's Bekarka and the Karka belongs to the government. However, so he has a svara to say that even the Shach will agree, but he says even if the Shach doesn't agree, according to the Ramah and a lot of Paiskim Paskim like the Ramah, we say Dina de Malchusa Dina. This is something that's Lakanos Kol B'nei B'dina, and we cannot remove the seicher. He remains mesupik if the landlord is allowed to raise the rent. And even there, he says you can't. The seicher is considered a muksuk. You can't take more money away from him without. But he says that's a suffix, and because it's a suffix, we can't charge the seicher more because the seicher is a muksuk. But for sure, he says can't kick out the seicher. Dina Demalchusa Dina. That's the Imri Yesher. There are a lot of Paiskim who agree with the Imri Yesher. On the other hand, you have Chabad Sasharin. Sasharin, a little bit later, he says exact opposite. And again, we'll read his lashon because his lashon is very. He writes a very rich lashon to explain his position. And he addresses the Imri Yesher. He saw what the Imri Yesher wrote, and he says, "V'nira deharav mitar nazal hayakaisav zeis b'shas hamelchama da'az hayabe'emes eis lachatz v'deicha gadol." He says he doesn't agree with the Imri Yesher at all. It's malamet schus. But he was saying the Imri Yesher was saying at the time of the war, and there was really a lot of pressure and big problems for people to find a place to live. V'hutzrach lahapich b'schusim shel haseichim. And he needed to really work hard to find a schus for the renters. Aval achshav says the Chabad Sasharin haseichel geizer lahefich. Logically, it makes sense to say the exact opposite, which is that avil gadol nagad balabatim. This is a tremendous injustice. Maybe it's the takana for the seichrim. Maybe it's takana for the renters, but for the balabatim, it's an avil gadol, it's an avil gadol nagad balabatim. Shemeskayim behem shercha tavuach leinecha v'zarim sheltim b'rechushim ve'en lahem meshia. And pasuk shercha tavuach leinecha, your ox will be slaughtered before your eyes. And you can't do anything about it. A pasuk and from the Teichacha, this is other people are using their property and they can't do anything about it. V'gam la seicher means a takana. He says the truth is even for the seichrim, even for the renters, it's not a takana. Rak la seichrim hayishanim. It's only a takana. It's only helpful for the people for the seichrim who are already there, but for people in the future who want to come rent now an apartment, no apartment available. So it's not takana for anyone. It's not takana for the balabatim for sure. Now it's not even takana for the seichrim. It's takana for some of the seichrim. So. He says, for them, the takana it just causes more problems because the apartments become more expensive. Then he says, We know she'ikar hachzakas hachay kazeh, because this law really, where does it come from? Hubal yidei ezen nivcharim chafshim. He's some certain elected officials. Sheyesh b'hem deis v'shittis hakamonistin v'socialistin. He says this is a communist, socialist law. It's not al pi Torah. It doesn't work. You don't say Dina Demalchusa, and al pi halacha, you have the right to remove a seicher from your property when the time comes. This is again the motivation for this law is to put pressure on the wealthy people and to take away their money. Shakal elu hashitas neged haTorah, because all these shittas are against the Torah. Chas v'shalom, to say that this is din gomer. So to summarize, you have on the one hand the Imre Yesher, and other Pesachim, he says that tenant protection is a great law. It works al pi Dina Demalchusa. It's very helpful for people. It's a very, very good takana nowadays, so that people shouldn't end up on the streets. And on the other hand, you have the Chavatel Sasharin, who says that this is not a good law. It's a communist law. It's a socialist law. It doesn't work al pi Dina Demalchusa, and that's that. That claim of Dina Demalchusa doesn't get you anywhere. The Igris Moshe in the Shalos Teshuvos Chesed Mishpat Chilek Aleph Siman Ayin Beis, he says the whole the discussion whether we say Din Malchus over here or not is only if the law took effect after the rental period started. But if the law was already in effect before they agreed on the rental, so then they entered into this agreement with the understanding that they're going to abide by Din Malchus and by whatever rent control or tenant protection laws there are. And then he says it's as if they made a t'nai between themselves to adhere to this. So then for sure we would follow Din Malchusa. But if the law took effect only after, then we can debate whether or not Din Malchusa applies. Kalpanim, we obviously can't say name askana halacha l'maisa because it's a machlikas. So that is the discussion in Pesachim regarding rent control and or tenant protection. Regarding the second shaila about bankruptcy, somebody who owes someone else money declares bankruptcy. So whether or not when they have no money, it doesn't really make a difference whether bankruptcy is legitimate al pi Torah or not, because they have no money. But the shaila is when they make their money back. So according to Din, the malchus of bankruptcy absolves your debt. According to Torah, it doesn't. There's no such thing as bankruptcy. So do you have to still pay back the old loans from before the bankruptcy? According to halacha, or does halacha recognize that bankruptcy absolves the debt? So just to first of all to make it clear that the concept of bankruptcy, I'm going to read a lashon from Shalos Teshuvos Chelkas Yaakov Chesed Mishpat Siman Lamed Beis, is neged din Torah shalanu. The kol zman shaloi machal beferish la'loiva. When a person loans another person money, as long as they do not beferish, they're not beferish meichel the loan, pshita dal pidinenu yachal etpeya ma'aloiva masha magiele. It's pashut that according to halacha, he's able to demand from the borrower what he's owed. Now, the only shaila is if we can say Din Demalchusa Dina. So, do we say Din Demalchusa Dina or not? Once again, we have a machlekes. Igris Moshe, Chesed Mishpat Chilek Beis, Siman Samach Beis. He brings Bekitzer the Ramah in Siman Shin Samach Tes, and he says that the Ramah says that Din Demalchusa applies to everything, not only to things that are totally in karka. And then he says about anything, but according to the Ramah, that anything that's takana, skol, b'nei medina, we do say Din Demalchusa Dina. Says the Igris Moshe, ulefize hadinim shakava melucha liim acher liim echad yarad minachasa ve'in b'koichel l'nail esek shalei shakirin pshitas regel. According to this, the law that the government enacted, that somebody who lost all his money and is not able to run his business, and not able to pay back his loans, is able to declare bankruptcy, and he owes a lot of people money. Okay, so then the court appoints it says over here a vad of three people. However, it's done. So whatever he does have is distributed to his creditors, um, based on whatever system it is. But obviously, they don't get what they're fully owed. They only get partial repayment. Says the Grismesha, Mela have a bazal psakar Rama Dina Demalchusa Dina. According to the Rama, this is Dina Demalchusa Dina. Plain and simple. And therefore, the shaila over there that he discusses, that if somebody takes away takes money that's that is owed to them, but they take it shaloi alpi the din de malchus dina, they have to give it back. Doesn't come to them alpi halacha. However, the Hilchos Yaakov, we mentioned earlier, he nice Choa, he summarizes all the shittas of din de malchusa, and then he concludes nimtzeinu lemeid benidin didan lekol shittas ein lanu lashkiach al din dar koy shu neged din teira. In our case, lekol shittas. Before we go into lekol shittas, let's take a step back and try to think about it for ourselves. L'chaira, you could taina that whether bankruptcy should be legitimate according to Din al-Machusa should be tali the machlekes Rama and Shach. According to the Rama, it's l'takanas kol b'nei Medina. Anybody who ends up owing a lot of money and is unable to pay it back, they have a takana that applies to kol b'nei Medina that they can declare bankruptcy, even though it's neged din terah. It doesn't matter Din al-Machusa Dina. According to the Shach, will say no way. However, comes the Hilchos Yaakov and he says l'kol shittis. Everyone, even the Rama over here, agrees that we don't say Din Demalchusa Dina by bankruptcy. Right? Igor Taka said that according to the shit of the Rama, we do say it says Hilchos Yaakov no. To say that the malva, the creditor, forgave his debt, his loan, even though he was never really meichel. But because the courts paskin that you're meichel, bankruptcy, Imkain, Yiftal called Dina Atera. All the din of terror will become battle. Says the Hilchos Yaakov, even according to the Rama gives a lot of power to Dina Demalchusa Dina. Even for something that's negative Torah, but it's takanas b'nei Medina, says the Rama, we say Dina Demalchusa Dina. Says the Hilchos Yaakov, Benidin Didan, Eza takana b'nei Medina, yesh b'zeh ligzul mameinim b'pnei she'ein lo levid l'shal l'shalim. What's the takanas b'nei Medina? To steal money from someone because the leva currently has no money to pay back. So you don't have money to pay back. Fine, you work on it, and eventually, hopefully, you'll be able to pay it back. But to say you're Michael, it's gzela. Right? When he has money, he'll pay it back. The Torah says, you're not allowed to put pressure on somebody to pay back a loan. When he has no money, you can't harass somebody to pay you back money when they don't have the money to pay back. But it doesn't say, it says it doesn't say this potter from paying back. When he has the money to pay back, he'll pay it back. What bankruptcy? What din Demalchusa? That's the Hilchos Yaakov. The Minchas Yitzchak, the answer to the exact same Shiloh, by the way. Shiloh is the same exact Lashon from the same year. It's the same Shiloh was sent to both of them. He says no. If the Malva was not masking beferish to be meifel the loan, he knew about the bankruptcy and he wasn't meich. That's what they wanted. That's what the Shah wanted to tell that the Malva knew about the bankruptcy. He wasn't meichel. If he didn't want to be meichel, bankruptcy means the court is telling you are meichel on the loan. If you're not meichel, you should have been meichel. Says Minchas Yitzchak, no. If he wasn't meichel beferish, he's not meichel. Just because he wasn't meichel, he didn't protest the bankruptcy. That's the declaration of bankruptcy. That's not good enough. And if he doesn't pay back what he owes, gazela. That's what Minchas Yitzchak said. And okay, so we brought the Hilchos Gezeilah and the Minchas Yitzchak because they discuss it from the Dina Demalchusa Dina angle, but the truth is other poskim, the Minchas Elazar and others, Avnei Tzedek, also speak about bankruptcy. They don't go to Dina Demalchusa, but they say it's not a mechila and you still have to pay it back. In the Shalas Shivas of Tzela Chachma, Chelakei Simon Kuftasov, he brings all the above mentioned poskim, Hilchos Yaakov and the Minchas Yitzchak and the Minchas Elazar also, I believe, and he on the other he brings their opinion, and then he brings others, not the Igros Moshe, but he brings others who so it comes out from what they say that we do say in the Hilchos Dina, and to give legitimacy to a declaration of bankruptcy. Maskana, he says it's machlekes achreinim, and it's not much you could do. It's Lamaisa. It's very hard to take money away from somebody in Besdin when the din is shana b'machlekes, is totally in a machlekes achreinim. So, what it comes down to is that either they make up shara, or the bezdin can be machria maybe one way, like one side in certain cases with other factors, but gufa shel davar, it's a machlekes. To conclude, our discussion of Dina Demalchusa that we had over the last 3 shiurim, it's fitting to read the words of the Heshav Moshe and that he writes in the Tshuva about Dina Demalchusa and Chesed Mishpat Simon Tzaddik. We would be remiss not to mention it because any discussion of Dina Demalchusa inevitably comes across the Heshav Moshe, and after what we discussed today, hopefully it's clear. It says the Heshav Moshe as follows regarding Dina Demalchusa. There is a tremendous mevucha, hard to translate mevucha exactly, but a lack of clarity, confusion among the poskim in this inyan, and many contradictions. Sometimes they raise the banner of the melucha to the highest heights. And sometimes they lower it to the dust. And they give no legitimacy whatsoever to the Demalchusa. And I have not seen any one of the Mechabrim, any one of the authors of Sfarim, who can say something clear, a strong Yisoid, in order to reconcile all the places that speak about this, Laval Yehevahem Niftal Ikesh Kushu Tifta, so that there should not be any confusion or contradiction or question. So, as we've seen today, in Shilas of Dina Demalchusa Dina that are Benadam Lachavere, it's very complicated and there's big machlekes, and we have machlekes in Min Akatza Lakatza. In Dina Demalchusa Dina that's been Adam Lamalchus, it's a little bit more straightforward, even though, as we discussed, it's not always so straightforward what is and what isn't. But it's a little bit more straightforward. But Dina Demalchusa Dina that's been Adam Lachavere, we have poskim who say that the law that's Dina Demalchusa Dina is the greatest law ever, and we should recognize it under Dina Demalchusa Dina, so that people should not be thrown out on the streets, so that people should have the opportunity to turn over a fresh leaf. And then on the other hand, you have poskim about the exact same law. Say, what do you mean? This is an avla. This is a gazela. This doesn't work. This is completely illegitimate. So, with that, we will conclude our discussion of Dina Demalchusa and the shir for today. We didn't learn any Alter B'Shulchan Aruch inside today because we finished Sif Yutes, and from Sif Chaf and on, everybody goes on to a new sugya. But just wanted to wrap up some of the loose ends that we raised in the previous year regarding Dina Demalchusa, and Be'ezras Hashem in the next year we will continue with the remainder of Hilchos Gezeilah.